Hi, everyone. Welcome to Siege 2018 convention. My name is Jonathan Betancourt. I'm a junior game designer at Tripwire Interactive. And what this panel is going to be about is what you need to know about video game quality assurance. So in this panel, we're going to be asking questions to everyone here. And without further ado, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. So we'll start with.
Hi, I'm Kurt Hartung. I am a programmer at Tripwire Interactive. I work directly with Jonathan, and I'm at the other side of QA, and that's hopefully the perspective I'd like to give you is what we think and what we do when we interact over the wall. Right, Jonathan?
Yes.
Hey, I'm Brian Marquez. I work at Adultum Games. I'm on the production team. I don't really have a title, but I do production there. But I'm similar. I will be talking about QA from the other side.
My name's Cody Ulrich. I am a quality assurance tester at Tripwire Interactive. Before Tripwire, I have worked as an intern for game production at Cartoon Network, and I've also volunteered at Hi-Rez's HRX Expo a couple of years. Graduate of Kennesaw State University with a bachelor's in computer game design and development, so I'm basically here to speak about the two different sides of QA on the developer and production side of things.
My name is Toby Sexton. I'm with GameScribes. We do localization. We also do game testing, compliance testing, compatibility testing, all that kind of stuff. We're here representing basically the third party, anybody that you might need, just different ideas that might help you with your QA needs.
Awesome. So we got to meet everyone. So I'm going to start off with a question just to get things going about QA. So what exactly is video game QA?
Hell?
Fair. Well, I guess from my perspective, video game QA is playing. You think QA is just get to play games all day? I'm sure very few of you have that misconception, but you do. But you have to play it clinically, and that can be boring. And you have to have focus. And there's really two sides of QA. There's the play games because I like breaking stuff. Play the games and find the problems with them. And there is that. That's one big half. But there's the other half, and that's the targeted side. And that's what's not often talked about, where there's a bug we know about, and we're trying to find out how to reproduce it. We say we know that the game crashes around here when we're doing things like this. QA department, find it and tell me how to reproduce it, because once a bug is reproducible, once I can follow steps and do it, it's dead. It doesn't live long at all. It's the bug that happens one time in 100, or sometime during this level maybe it happens, that are really difficult to find. So that's for me what QA does is they find bugs both from in cold, just find things that are wrong, and find things that we know are wrong and figure out exactly how they do it. In addition to all the other things, I just yes, for three parts. Is just does the game do what it's supposed to? Sometimes bugs aren't obvious. A typo is a bug, or it's something that we want to make sure that the game is, what's written on the box.
You pretty much nailed that.
Yeah. What he said.
Yeah, what he said, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's testing the game out so you make sure that it runs well for the player. So that way you try to get rid of all the problems that might come up or that they would anticipate. So therefore they don't reach out to you on the threads and come back to you on the boards and troll you to death. I mean, that's really it.
Which they will do.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Review
You want to make sure that you find everything through either sprint testing, like you were saying, or through comprehensive testing to make sure you hit every single corner. And if you miss it, well, that's too bad.
So since we found out kind of what QAing is what kind of qualifications are needed for someone who wants to pursue a career in quality assurance for a video game studio?
Oh man, I would definitely say don't just say you have a love for games. You definitely need some sort of technical background. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and they're just like, man, I love playing games. I would be perfect for quality assurance.
You
'cause
actually
that's
kind of
all I
have to
do.
hate games. I really
Yeah.
want to kill them and destroy them.
That's true. Like you really need to not just love games, but also hate them and learn that you need to destroy a game. No matter how much you love that game, you need to destroy it. I don't care if it's your baby. I don't care if it's like your favorite game ever. You need to kill it. And that's something you need to learn over time, but that's something you still want to have like some sort of technical background on. whether you went to school for coding or whatever, you just need to understand that games are not just playing them if you're in QA. Yeah, you will be playing a game and you'll play it from start to finish, and then you'll do it again, and then you'll do it again, and you'll do it again. So you just need to have an understanding of what you're getting into, on top of,
How many people here are looking
everything.
to get into QA? Okay.
Probably everybody.
Well, that's actually one of the things I wanted to address. How many are looking to get in QA because they think that's their foot in the door to get in to do something they really want to do? Don't be afraid to put your hand up. That's probably a lot of people. Okay.
Well, you should. You should. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a way to get your
And that's okay, but I just want to dispel a myth I heard really crystallized in a previous talk, which was everyone thinks to get in the games industry, the breaking in session, and probably a lot of you were there, was become QA and that's your way into the game service. And the problem is that's kind of true, but it's not always true, and it's actually very rarely the case. It's an entry-level position, or can be, but the senior, the mid-level QAs, they're very valuable, and I want them to stay there. A good QA person is extremely valuable, and it's a high-level position, and it's very skilled. And a lot of people don't think that. They think that the QA department is just a whole bunch of kids right out of college or interns, and all they do is play the game, and the real work happens somewhere else, and that's so not the case. I just wanted to make sure someone said that to you.
Right. QA is extremely important for the entire production pipeline.
We rely on it.
Yeah, it's like if the QA doesn't get done, the producers can't do their work, or the marketers can't do their work, or the designers can't do their work. Like, the game won't release unless QA is done, so it's super important. And yeah, it can be a good foot in the door, at least for my experience. I'm sure, Cody, you've had the same
Definitely.
thing. The QA team, they're the ones that work with everybody the most. So it's like you'll find an issue. It might be something programming-wise. You could go talk to a programmer. If you find something art-wise, you could go talk to an artist. Like, you have the ability to talk to everybody on the team. So it's a good way to, quote-unquote, put your foot in the door for that. But there is also that understanding that QA is probably the most important part of the production pipeline. So they might want to keep you there as well.
And you have to know who to talk to. That requires quite a bit of knowledge of the way games work. I mean, there's a big difference between an asset that has the wrong texture and an asset that's performing incorrectly. One's an LD, the other one's an artist. And to know that difference is to not waste someone's time, and that's what makes you valuable. We want you to come take the right problem to the right person. And that's not your boss's job. That's not the senior's job. And he will do that, but it really ought to be yours. When you file a bug, when you figure something out, you should already have in your mind, this is probably programming, it's probably code, this is probably art assets. And I certainly appreciate when a QA person comes to me and says, this sword doesn't work. And what you mean by doesn't work is it's got a bad particle effect. I'm a programmer. What are you talking to me for? Well, because it doesn't work, and I appreciate someone, like Jonathan, who's very good at this, who knows not to talk to me and waste my time.
But some of the things they're talking about are like in-house QA departments,
Yeah.
which not that many companies actually have that. It's
Right.
it's a little bit of a luxury. But within the person that they do have to have somebody at least who understands QA and basically can head it up, because otherwise you go out to a third party, so where the company doesn't have any extra expenses or anything else like that. So another way to get it, not just through a company like they were saying, is also to work with any kind of third party testing facilities or something like that, be able to work with them as well. But then they still have to be able to find the bugs, spell it out, be able to replicate it, give them at least the pathway to be able to possibly replicate something, because that's where it gets held up a lot. And sometimes that can take days to be able to replicate a major bug, and then you end up with what we call known issues.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But just to kind of go back real quick, as far as liking to kill things, like he was saying, we had one tester who basically was our lead tester that we utilized, and he was very, very proud of himself, and that he was able to kill a favoritely loved child's character over and over again. Because in kids games, the characters are not supposed to die, and the kids are supposed to be successful through the game, which unfortunately that doesn't happen a lot. So he was very happy he was able to kill Dora the Explorer 5 times, so they thought they fixed it, and then he was able to figure out another way to take her out. So basically, that's kind of funny.
That is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, and then you have to be able to be on the hunt. You have to find it and be able to try to find the problems. Agreed?
Oh, yeah. And some people have the touch. They just, I hand them a product, say this works great. Like, yeah, but when I push this, this, and this, it dies. I'm like, I didn't even make it back to my desk.
Yeah.
I swear, they just have and that is amazingly valuable. I mean, I've got a feature. This is not something that's hypothetical. I have a really major feature that's being rolled out on our next release, and I can't call it done until QA has had time to vet it, and it's complicated. And that means it's going to take lots of time. 3 or 4 QAs taken offline for a week to test this feature, and it's a big deal. If it's a little wrong, our community is going to be up in arms, believe me. And I know there's bugs. I know it. But I'm waiting. I don't know, what are they going to be? And so far, everything's coming back as almost working. It's working. No, it's not. There's got to be something wrong. People from Tripwire know what I'm talking about.
That brings me to something that is like really important to understand is every game's gonna have bugs, like no matter what. You need to understand what bugs are unacceptable and what bugs might be acceptable. Like, yeah, in a sense. They're like everybody's played this might be a bad example, but everybody's played a Bethesda game, I'm sure. Those games are, everybody nods, everybody laughs. Those games are synonymous with bugs. They're still phenomenal games, but they understand what bugs are acceptable to release with in their deadline, and they know to prioritize, what bugs aren't. And that's one thing to definitely focus on in QA. It's like if you find a bug that you know is going to be a minor, always keep a note of it. But if it's something that you know is, not the worst thing, just push it aside. If you find something that clearly breaks the game, you can't progress further in that whatever level you're playing.
That's gotta be fixed.
Like that's got to be fixed. So like you always have to keep an understanding of what's the most important.
And sometimes it goes both ways, but the way I'm going to talk about it is sometimes you'll see a bug that's kind of minor, and you think, how come they haven't fixed this? And the programmer says, well, because I have to refactor an entire system to do that. It'll take me offline for 3 days. And the sword is green instead of forest green. So we're going to let that go. You have to be willing to let that go. As a QA person, you have to not take it personally. We found your bug. We believe you. We're not going to fix it. Doesn't mean it was a bad bug. Doesn't mean it's you. It means that we ran it through the pipeline and it would take more resources than we have. That happens all the time. And when you see a game that has bugs, a lot of bugs, I want you to remember is that's the bugs they left in. You should see the ones they fixed. Those are the ones they couldn't ship with, and there were a lot of them, I guarantee it. These are the ones left over that were acceptable. But there's an expression which is kill the engineers, it's time to ship.
It kind of goes both ways too. It's like, a lot of times as a QA person, you'll be in there and you'll be digging, you'll be finding, you give the example, you say this has happened, and if you start with too many bugs, then some of the designers and some of the people that are actually making the game, the devs, they start getting a little upset. They start as if you're seriously trying to find problems just to tell them that they don't know their job, because you got to ignore back and forth, because they're artists, they are creative people, and it's their baby. I mean, as a QA tester, well, let me go back. As a developer and a designer, your job is to make the game awesome. Your job as a working for somebody else is to say, look what I did. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Look at this. Because you know all the things to avoid in the back of your head. As human beings, we try to avoid things that are going to cause us pain. Right? The QA's department job is to bring out the pain. Your job is to basically find those problems and say, yeah, you thought it worked, but did you go over here to this far corner? And they're like, why would I go to that corner? The whole game will stop. You're like, right, I know. You need to go to that corner and figure it out.
It's a real thing, and I've experienced it, especially as an engineer. We say, here, this works great, and they'll test and say, no, when you equip this and do this, it doesn't work. I say, well, don't do that. And I know that sounds dumb, and I hear myself thinking it, and I have to not say it because they're right.
Yeah,
but I would never do it because I know not to.
Yeah, you know the game.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, you know the
it's
problems.
Very true. You can't test. You can test your own code to some degree, but you can't test it properly. It can't be done.
Yeah, and that's why, at least from my perspective, when I first started at Tripwire Interactive, I started as QA. I worked at Cartoon Network for about 6 months. So I graduated from Georgia Tech. I got an intern at Cartoon Network, and that gave me a lot of experiences with the workflow that developers go through. And you learn different methodologies depending on the company, but for the most part, you always use systems like Jira to be able to maintain bugs. And you'll be always in constant communication with other developers. So it's always a really neat experience to be able to talk to people, to be able to see what they're working on, and to work with them to be able to fix their problems. Because what ends up happening is their job is to develop, to add features, to code features, but a lot of times they don't have a lot of time to test their own materials. So that's why the QA team comes in and verifies every little thing about the a game so that when we have a list of issues, they go through and they're able to fix each one correctly. And that's kind of what QA is. You're a detective. You go through the entire game, you find out who killed who, what the crime scenes are like, and then from there you write reports and basically report those, and they get organized in this giant priority list, and then each one gets fixed, hopefully, and then passed back to the QA to be able to regress them. And I know for me personally, when I first started, QA was going to be a stepping stone. My passion was game design, and it was always kind of a question of like, will I be able to become a game designer if I'm working in QA? Because if you're really good at QA,
We
they
want
want
to
you
keep
to,
you there.
yeah, they want to keep you in QA. So you kind of go into your head like, you always want to do the best you can at the work that you're into. At the same time, you want to make sure to cater your work towards what you like. So just because you're doing QA doesn't mean that you just need to do one thing and be stuck with it. You can explore different alternatives and solutions I guess, for example, for me was game design. We didn't have a lot of game documentation. So to QA something and not have any clue how a system works is god awful. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing with the system. I'm just playing it. So you don't know how it works. And what I did was I ended up writing a lot of the documentation myself. And with that documentation, it helped the QA team. So eventually, after about 3 years, I went from being a QA to a senior. And that's when I started really getting into documentation, into giving advice for designs. And it's good to definitely not take it personally if your ideas aren't taken into consideration, especially with a lot of people being in time crunches. Sometimes an idea can't be taken into consideration because of that. But that's okay when they see that you're working into some subject that you're very into and you keep going on with it. Eventually, you can get into a position. And at the same time, the position has to be available as well. If the position is not available, there's
So you have to
really,
wait for someone to
yeah, you pretty much have to wait for someone to either get promoted or leave the company.
and be honest about it. You know, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm here for QA, but I really want to be a game designer. You know, that's
Mhm.
okay to say. That's okay to be, and then we know you're working towards it.
Yeah.
Speaking of writing bugs, over communicate. Something else I want to talk about. When you write up a bug, one of the most there's several parts to it, and I'm not going to go into it now. But one of the most important part is the repro steps, and that's how do you do. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. Go here, do this. Make sure that is as stupid as possible. You would not believe how many apparently intelligent, smart, brilliant programmers will go, it didn't work. Recall more information. And I'll tell you two reasons for that. One is it really didn't work. The other is we're kind of punting. Like, I'll do the steps. I did this, I did this, I did this. The bug didn't happen. Needs more info. Back over the wall. That bug's gone for another day. Now I can work on something else. If the steps work properly, I can't do that. You're like, God damn, he's right. It really does happen. And more than once, I have gone to QA. I've walked over there and said, show me. Your steps don't work, but I believe I believe you. I don't think you're lying, but they didn't work for me. Can you show me this? Be prepared to do that. And by over communicating, by saying exactly pedantically what you did, um, it, it it stops the round trips, and that keeps everyone's time from being wasted. I just make sure you do that.
Yeah, I've always been told like don't make the developers uh, feel like they're stupid when they're reading it, but make sure to have your repro steps understandable for like a 5-year-old. Like you need to make sure they're so easy to follow that literally anybody can do it.
And there's another. I want to say something else, especially when I'm in the debug phase of a project. My mind's everywhere, and when I need to shift context to whatever this system is, I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to load that in my head. I'm just going to bring up the bug and I'm going to do that. And unless unless it's a system that I've just been working on, I have no idea how it works. I figured out it would take me 15 minutes. I got 50 bugs to fix. You know, literally, I have 20 or 30 bugs to get through today or tomorrow. I don't have time to dig into each system and fully comprehend it. I just want to do your steps and fix exactly what's wrong and move on. So that's why you make them simple, not because you're insulting their intelligence.
So not only do you have to like love to play games, not only you have to like want to like hate games, but you also have to be able to be good at English. be able to write clearly.
Communication skills are super important.
Super important, and you have to not take it personally because you are, as you said, you're insulting everyone whose bug you not on purpose, of course, but that's the meta message. The meta message
You're
of every
the
bug
troll.
you write.
You are the troll.
Your code sucks because of this. That's everything you do. Your feature sucks because of this. So a good developer won't take it personally. I certainly don't. And a good QA doesn't mean it personally, but still that message gets across. And sometimes you'll get designers and developers, and particularly artists, who really start to get mad at you for finding their bugs in their system. Just be aware it's going to happen. Let it roll off your back. It's going to happen. Just be nice about it.
And one thing I want to add, kind of jumping off Kurt's point, communication is so very key in this position. Not only are you going to be dealing with a lot of different people in different departments, whether it's programming, art, UI, stuff like that, you also want to be able to communicate with your own team itself. Because there's going to be a lot of times where you are thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to spend my time doing this, or I'm assigned a task to do. And you'll run into situations where somebody else is also doing a task, and congratulations, you just wasted a couple hours because you were doing the same thing. You always want to be talking with your team, making sure you know what everybody's doing any single time. If you have any kind of issue, you're not sure about something, make sure to bring it up to someone immediately. Like, you always want to be talking with somebody at almost any point in the day. It's like you don't want to be goofing off or stuff like that, but just being able to be clear and concise with your team just to helps avoid those kind of missteps and saves you time.
Speaking of communication, delete the word should from your vocabulary. Gone. Nothing should do anything. I expect this to happen. That's what you say, that's what you write. Don't say, I grabbed the sword and it should have killed the troll. No, I grabbed the sword, I expected it to kill the troll. What actually happens is it didn't. It's a very neutral, non-confrontational way of saying things, and it automatically, should is an argument, is the beginning of an argument. It should have done this. Well, no, it shouldn't. That's what the developer's going to think. I expected, oh yeah, well, I guess that's a reasonable thing to have expected, and it didn't happen. It's a way of diffusing a situation immediately. Just don't use the word should.
And also, whenever you're doing it, make sure you set up your database. You mentioned Jira.
Jira's a great one.
There's a couple. There's Mantis. There's others that are actually good. Someone was mentioning that they use Trello. They're using Trello for it. They've set up their systems so it works well.
Use it.
There's even Excel files, which please. But if that's what you got, that's what you got. But in general, make sure that you communicate properly what the bug was, the route that it took to get there, but then also the steps that it took to fix it, and that it was fixed. Make sure you add columns that actually so you can verify that the fixes have been implemented properly and they did work. And then on the 5th time you play the game, after you've made all the changes, a couple of those may come back again because it may spawn something else. So just be aware of that. I guess the main thing is just make sure you have enough time, keep the communication open, make sure you track it properly, but also make sure you have time. Because just because your game plays in like 10 hours, let's say, right? Allow yourself like 60 hours to get through it.
Yeah, you'd think having that history and that database is so important because you'd think when a bug comes back as fixed that it's fixed, 30% chance in general, depending on and the QA gets to know you. when person A sends a bug in as fixed, QA just, oh yeah, probably, let's check, yeah, sure it is. When person B comes in, yeah, right, okay, we're going through and testing it again and again, yeah, what do you know, it isn't fixed, kick it right back.
It becomes like a troubleshooting.
You hear the laughter back there? He knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not kidding. Yeah. And having the history of that bug is incredibly valuable in those situations.
It becomes like troubleshooting because what's going to happen is if you're working QA for a department for a live game that's being developed and you're keeping up with it as you go, because if they'd finish this level or that level, and some companies are so large that they'll be working on multiple levels at different times based on the doc and the design and what's happening. So this may be doing great, then they're over here, then they add something and they go back and go, wait a minute, because we added this, now we got to change this over here.
Halo testing.
Yeah, so basically you've got to be aware of that it's going to be constantly changing. So don't expect it to start and play the same way every time, because it may have started fine one day and then the next day you load in the build and you're like, wait, it's not working, and they go, well, what's not working? You say, well, it's not working, like it won't even start, like what did you do? I expected this to happen, it should have happened.
I have read that bug, game expected to start, result it didn't. Believe me, that's a very neutral way of telling someone they
Yeah.
made a mistake.
And also sometimes, making sure that you share it in the proper formats. And when you do share with like a third party, make sure that there's time for them to get it, to load it into their pipeline, to make sure that they can smoke test it, make sure that it works within their system, because a lot of times just going over the internets, you end up with some issues sometimes. Time.
So I'm going to ask a pretty experienced question about what was your most positive experience with QA or working as QA, and can you also name like a negative or really bad experience you had with it, and what's something that people should expect or be prepared for when you're doing QA?
I can think of lots of answers to all.
Same. My best experience was leaving QA. No, I'm just kidding. No, just being able to find a major bug and see that bug get fixed is really rewarding. As much as it may sound like it's not a lot. My very first day working QA, I interned at Cartoon Network, and I found a bug on a game that literally switched your account with somebody else literally across the world. And that really upset the producer on the game, as expected. The game had just launched, and it's like, hey, if you do this, 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 and this, you literally switch your account with somebody in Australia. And he's just like, oh, God. So, like, he hated me for the first 2 weeks. Now we're really great friends, but I guess to answer your question, Jonathan, that was both like one of the best and worst experiences my first couple weeks there, because I found out like, yeah, I know what QA is. I can figure out what this bug is. I can repro it. Nobody else was able to do it. But then at the same time, I started and everybody hated me. So that also something to understand is like people are gonna get angry.
They're gonna get angry.
They're gonna get mad at you. They're not actually mad at you. They're just mad at the
They're
bug.
just mad. Yeah. I had a very
angry
positive
in
experience. I
general.
was working at CCP. I don't even need to be that specific. The point is, I was working on something, and a feature hadn't been tested for a while just because it hadn't come up. And a tester did test it, and there was something seriously wrong with it. And the problem was that it was in a system no one had touched. And that happens. What must have happened is something someone did touch affected it in a way we didn't expect. And the problem with this particular feature, again, I don't want to be too specific because it's not that I can't be, it's just it wouldn't interest you, is that I had to find out when the problem happened. I couldn't say what happened, but I said there's been, say, 2 weeks of check-ins. One of those broke it. I need you to find the build exactly a check-in in which it broke. Because it's not, yeah, he's shaking his head back there. He knows what I'm talking about. You're going to be asked to do this. Yeah, this build's broken. When did that happen? Because it's not obvious. I need you to tell me, well, it wasn't broken now, and it was broken then, which means one of these files broke it. And the QA came back to me the next day and told me that it was this build. And I said, oh, great. That build's 3.5 weeks old. Did you guys load every single check-in? And they had. And they had bracketed it and gotten in, and like 3 developers, and I didn't realize it all. And I was like, wow, that guy, I really appreciated how much work and effort that took, and I told them so. And it was a very positive experience, and that is incredibly valuable. That saved so much of my time. And it narrowed it down to like 3 files. Like, oh, God, found it immediately. So that was a very positive experience. And it's a pain in the butt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of my most frustrating was whenever we were brought in a build and the company said, yeah, we need you to look over this, we need you to run through it. It's a huge, massive MMO. It was a giant RPG game, like massive, right? And it's basically, we needed to do some sprint testing. We had like 2 sprint testers working on trying to get through the major parts of the game. Then we had like, we were going to take like 4 comprehensive testers to kind of like take out the whole world and check everything out. I mean, again, massive game. We were like, okay, great, no problem. Then they came back to us and we're like checking in with them, and they're like, okay, we're still going to need you to do this. We're like, okay, great, fantastic. Then they came to us and said, okay, we're ready to go. We're like, fantastic, we're ready to help you. Like, what are you looking for? They're like, well, we ship next week, but if you can, just we need you to run through the game and see if there's any problems. And we're like, you're releasing next week? And it was like,
What if we find one?
it was the beta, right? It was the beta. But we had like so many people, and they had like that everybody was going to be ready for it. But the problem was, we just said, okay, well, we're not going to make it, because they're like, well, what do you mean? We said, well, what's going to happen is we're going to play, and we only work like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, maybe.
Is that
Maybe
news to
push
some?
9. On a weekend, and like in a day and a half, like that Saturday, we're going to get overrun. Like we're going to get overrun, and they did. They did. They got hit overrun so bad that they ended up having to shut down the game and shut it down and basically wait like 3 weeks before they reopened it again for the public because the public started finding problems, and because they started finding problems, then other problems started coming up and just being created within the I guess the matrix of it all. Anyway, that was the most frustrating thing that I remember that I've ever had to deal with.
It's nice to have the time when you do to. The first time I saw this, I was like, oh right, you can't just say we're going to spend 60 days or 30 days testing. What you say is we're going to spend 15 days testing and 15 days fixing what we find.
Right.
And setting those 2 blocks of time aside is important, even if that's what you mean when you say 30 days, is to say, no, for the first 10 or 15, we're going to find all our criticals and that's it. And then we're going to decide, we're going to triage it, and we're going to then spend the time fixing and figuring it out. And we're not going to do any more testing except for the stuff we absolutely have to.
Yeah, regress it back.
Regress it back. And that'll be handled by a competent management and scheduling team. But as QA, you have to be aware of that.
That's actually what I'm on now. I'm in production, so I'm in charge of making those schedules for those things, and it's always important to leave that buffer time in there. It's like, yeah, we want to schedule 2 weeks of testing. Okay, schedule 4. It's like that's.
What are you going to do in those
might-
2 weeks?
yeah.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, we
It's
may
gonna
need
be
it, we may
something.
not need it, but chances are 9 times out of 10 you're going to need it. Because QA just never ends.
The stream never ends.
One positive experience I had, and I always think back to it, it makes me feel a little bit smug thinking about it every time I reflect upon it. Started out pretty negative. There was an issue that came up that was a pretty big blocker that happened kind of at the beginning of the game that I thought up all the repro steps, everything. I'm like, oh, this is a really obvious bug. It's like, let me get this in, let me speak to the developers, let me speak to the designers. It's like, this is what's going on, this is what needs to change. And getting told, we're not going to do that, but we're going to go ahead and try and do this alternate solution. Already kind of realizing it's like, I don't think that's going to work, but okay. I mean, you're the developers, you're the designers. It's like, I'm just lowly QA. That's fine. A week can go by and that issue doesn't get resolved. It's like, yeah, it's still happening. I think this is a solution you need to go. It's like, oh, we're going to try this other step. Another week can go by, they keep trying steps until eventually they come back. It's like, oh, this issue was fixed. It's like, yeah, we just decided to end up removing it entirely. It's like, oh, so like I originally stated, we could have saved 3 weeks to a month with it, but all right. And I always think back to that one.
Yeah, again, it goes back to just make sure you have enough time and take it seriously. Don't take it lightly.
Yeah, because that's what happens if you run up against the wall and you don't have time to fix it. It just gets deleted. And I've seen some pretty great features get just disabled because they were buggy and they didn't have time to fix them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, one of the greatest things is basically digital download. I think it's great for marketing and everything else, but one of the worst things that's happened for actual, like, QA and being able to actually, like, get your game out to where it works is digital download. Because everybody thinks now they can do a patch for it, or they can fix
Yeah, we'll hot fix it.
Yeah, and honestly, I've seen a couple of times that's come back and really hurt the company, especially if they're running on a certain deadline where there's another game coming out that's very similar to it, that's coming out like within the same week or two. Like they've been saying, hey, our game's going to be ready to go, but then the bigger competition comes out and says, yes, but we have a game that's very similar to it. Where people dance a lot in it, and basically there's dancing characters that do flossing and things. Maybe you've heard of it, but it comes out like right at the exact same time, and one has been alpha tested for 5 years, and one has been basically been working, and they're ready to go, and they released it. They got hit with tons of bugs. The one that was alpha tested for 5 years came out and became one of the biggest games in the world, possibly. But they got crushed. Sometimes you won't have the opportunity because sometimes the community gets so upset. They get as upset as the developers when they start finding the bugs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so you want to...
More so.
Yes, you want to make sure you have time. Please give yourself time and make sure you track them. And I just want all the games to do awesome.
Yeah, one of my most positive experiences working in QA was when you find those really funny bugs that, unfortunately, whenever they get fixed, makes everyone sad. And sometimes you do find gold. Like sometimes you might find like a floating teapot, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna put this bug in. It's a minor. Or you find out that one of the weapons has friendly fire on, and now you can play a game of tag with your coworkers for about an hour until your manager is like, "Did you write that bug up?" And you're like, "I'll get it right." So those are always really fun. Like I have multiple stories. Like for example, one of our weapons is called the pulverizer. So it has the ability to right click and whatever you hit, it explodes. So during one of our playtest sessions, I was playing with it, and one of my coworkers was talking to me, and he walked in front of me right as I right clicked, and then he died. And we found out that the explosion on it can hit players and it can kill them. So for the next hour, we were all running at each other with the weapon, hitting us. The playtest, we didn't really get a lot of great feedback just because it didn't really turn into let's test the pulverizer and see if it's fun. Well, we found it was fun, but not really from how it was intended. So the designer was a little sad on that. And then it was fixed the next day, and it was unfortunate. So it's not there anymore. But yeah, it's always whenever
Yeah, I
you
remember
find a
the
really good
stories.
bug. Yeah, it's like we've had stuff like that.
Another something is more and more games are doing this. I don't think enough, but I think more there is they'll involve QA like from the very beginning. Like even when there isn't a game, when it's just a tech demo, when they're just showing the features, and they'll have QA in on it, and I think they should. And one of the big reasons is sometimes the bugs you find become features. And I know that's a meme, right? It's not a bug, it's a feature. That really happens. Say this bug looks awful. It's like, yeah, but we ran around for 2 hours killing each other. Yeah. Okay, put it in the game. Leave it that way. We'll polish it a little bit and get done. That really happens. I can't think of many games where it hasn't, to be honest, any real games.
Yeah, on that note, that's another like huge positive experience in QA is for my team at least at Adult Swim, like we like to make people laugh. So when we find a bug that's gold, we will literally make a meme out of it and like tweet it out all the time. It's like that helps break the monotony of just testing all the time. If somebody finds something, like everybody in our office is an artist, so they'll either make a meme or a short little video and just like send it around the office, and then if they're really good, we'll like tweet them out and do something cool. And then cool, now you have your bug all over the internet. Like that's something to look forward to in some places, not necessarily everywhere.
Yeah, it's a fun little bloopers. We do that at Tripwire too, where we house all of our bugs that we find during the game process. Our community manager does, and like we have a folder full of at least 100 videos from the very beginning of its production, where like you could crouch and uncrouch and start levitating into the air until you're just gone. To like when we introduce the a new model into the game where you're able to like spin around. Actually, the feet didn't animate as well as the lower body, so you can like twist into a pretzel. So we had stuff like that going on. So we had like a little home video that we make, and those are the very fun aspects of QA. It's basically where you find an exploit, a bug, and you kind of own it and you keep it, and then once it gets fixed, it's like okay, well time to find a new one. So that's where it gets very rewarding. But just because we have about 20 minutes, I'm going to leave it open to anyone who wants to ask a question from the group.
They're going
So
to need a
yeah,
mic then. You have to walk up.
yeah, I'm going to walk around so that we can get everyone. Okay, so
How many people still want to be in
started
QA?
with you.
There's more.
There's more
Yeah,
hands.
More now, right? Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Edward. I'm from Georgia Tech too. So this question is actually for Jonathan because he's from Georgia Tech. Yeah, just kidding. It's because your path from QA to game design is a path I'm interested in too. But you guys mentioned that QA is actually sort of the enemy of a developer, right? You point out their mistakes
In a
and they
friendly way,
get
but yeah.
angry at you at some point. So how do you manage that relationship? Like how do you move from QA to devs or game designers if they, get angry at you?
Well, we don't have
Thank you.
sandbags and machine gun nests. You don't have to be
Yeah,
a
they
dash for
don't
the
unless you
right.
give it to them. I mean, they have Nerf guns sometimes. You have to be careful with that. But yeah, no, that's a really good point. So it's not that they're really getting angry. It's just most of the time you want to have you want to direct it like whenever you're communicating with someone. So when you do find a bug and it's on a developer, their frustration is not on you. Their frustration is on the bug. It's usually because if it's something that they're not really sure what's causing it, and your repro steps don't really lead to a cause, a lot of their time is spent investigating it themselves. So most of the time, you want to be there as their support. You want to make sure that you're there communicating with them to see if you can provide a help of any kind to them. And that's kind of what led me into the designer role. I found out we didn't have a lot of design documentation. There was a lot of points where like I would find exploits with the designs that we've had, and I'd work with our designer at the time to basically figure these out with her, and we were able to come up with solutions together. So it's kind of putting yourself out to proactively look for these kind of bugs, and definitely having the ability to assess things calmly, because it is true whenever it's like very busy. A lot of people are trying to get their stuff in, and we have a time schedule to meet. People are not going to always be in the best of moods. And again, it's not that they're directing it to you, it's not personal at all. It's just kind of the moment. It's like if you have a homework assignment due tomorrow, your friend probably won't be as excited to play video games at the time, or
Yeah,
they
and
might be.
another thing, your anger is not directed at you yet. Okay, you're holding up a target. Look at this bug I found. All right, and the developer he's angry at the target. But as soon as you say again, now they're angry at you.
And you keep finding issues for that one person. That target keeps getting bigger and bigger.
It's bigger and bigger. You know what I'm talking about. So just try to make sure that you keep it clinical and non-personal.
I mean, everybody wants the game to be the best.
Yeah.
You're all working on the same team. You literally are. So just keep that in mind.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm a programmer, dev, designer. I'm not specifically within QA, but I guess you could say I kind of have like a very observant personality. And something that I notice as far as things that I observe to help me become better as a designer is sometimes people think that I hate things when I pick them apart. Like, for example, like even when I watch anime, like I can sit and enjoy it, and then someone's like, "Oh, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Yada yada yada yada." The character, blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, so what do you hate it? You hate it, don't you? No, I love it, but I guess as far as it goes with how do you package your feedback that you've experienced with whatever that you're doing in a way that doesn't come off as, say, disliking it, like you were saying, using expect as opposed to should.
Use experience.
So, yeah, packaging your opinions to other people that may not be as intense into it as other people may be. Yeah.
So one thing I've learned is when you're in QA, to know that you're not expected to give design feedback most of the time. Like a lot of times they will ask you like, hey, what do you think? Like, are you having fun? Because you will be playing that game more than most people. But your main role is to give feedback on, the bugs, whether you can make it from point A to point B, whether this specific item or this specific ability works as it should.
As expected.
As expected, yeah. I'm sorry, not as it should. As expected, the like taking something apart critically and giving like a real analysis on that is not necessarily the job of QA. That's something you could talk to with like a designer about it and get their feedback on it, and like that's always something that's encouraged, but that's not the expected role of QA.
I've got, unless you want to jump in on something.
Yeah, sure. I guess a lot of times it can depend on the person. I know for me personally, I'm somebody that's always actually seeking out critique. Like, if somebody just comes to me and says that something seems fine, they only have good things to say, it's like that always makes me nervous, because it's like I feel like you're holding something back to actually like not try and hurt my feelings, and that's actually the other side of it. But a lot of times I feel like you can kind of go with a approach. Some people may have heard of it. It's the compliment sandwich. It's the
Yeah.
you kind of you just always provide like something positive you found about something, that negative kind of meat to it. It's like what you didn't so much, or it's like what you found negative about, and then finishing up with something positive usually is pretty good with most people.
No, well, that's a good one. Also, I would say, like, whenever you're watching anything in general, or coming up with something, keep in mind the budget, how much time they had, and what the intention was of the filmmaker or the game designer or whoever they are, and see if they were able to reach what was possible or capable to be able to get to within the confines of what they had. So whenever you're looking at anything, just be aware of that.
Yeah, and be aware of what the designers intended, and there's a bear trap you can sometimes step into. And that is when one designer thinks it should be a certain way and he's the one in charge and everybody disagrees with him. And then you make the mistake of talking to that designer and telling him the same thing he's been hearing from everyone else that he's been disagreeing with. That's a bear trap because now he hates you because you're against me too, and you will run into that. So just be aware that it might not be you. You just might be bringing up something that's been bothering him.
Right. And if you do see something, say like you're like I said, when you're watching something on TV or something, you're like, this is great, I really enjoyed it. But just keep in mind what it was capable, and what restrictions they may or may not have. And then you'll be able to figure it out. You say that was great for this, but if it's not a AAA game, they don't have like how many millions of dollars to make the game. They only had like a few $100,000 to make the game, or $10,000, or maybe they're making it in their basement, and the game's amazing, and it was blowing everyone's mind. There's different levels of things and of different expectations.
So like scope, focus, compliments.
Yeah.
Scope is extremely important in games. In my experience, I've received a GDD for a game that's like 150 pages long. And it's like, wow, this looks great. How can we whittle that down to 50 pages? Or how can we get that to fit our 1-year timeline or a 9-month timeline with this budget? So that's another thing to understand when you're like giving feedback is like, as they mentioned, there's a specific timeline that they have, a specific budget that they have, and they had to tweak their entire project to fit that.
Right. I mean, Final Fantasy 1 is way different than Final Fantasy 7.
Right.
You can't play Final Fantasy 1 and go, oh, this would be great if it had all these extra things in it. Now, because at the time it was mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question, by the way. I actually wanted to ask something similar to that.
I see a lot of hands, so we should probably try and be a little quicker.
Yeah.
Because language really does matter a lot. And sort of on the flip side of that, how do you? I worked in not QA but customer service for a while in some things, and you get bombarded with all the things that go wrong all the time.
Mhm.
And you get a population of bias of like, how does anything work?
I know exactly what you're talking about. This feature's broken for everybody. No, it's broken for the 10 people who called you. The 10,000 who didn't, it's working fine for.
Yeah, the ones that you hear, it's 100% of what you hear.
I think it's called selection bias.
Yeah, I forget the exact term, but yeah. So how do you sort of quell that in yourself? Like, how many hours a day do you meditate? To get rid of that. How do you cope?
This is a big bag of weed.
Yeah, there's this great invention called alcohol that helps a lot.
You have to. You learn very quickly in the games industry and any industry is that there's a very vocal minority, and everyone learns that really quick. So you always take that with a grain of salt. Like, this seems to be broken for everyone. Like, oh really? Well, according to our metrics, it's not. Or you try and find corroboration. You have to find out what's really going on, or you test it yourself and say, it's a very limited thing, it's not really affecting. And we have those conversations almost explicitly. Is this affecting too many people? I know that sounds like it's a crazy thing to say, but say, it's not affecting that many. Okay, we'll fix it, but not right now. Or the other side, it's affecting a lot of people very badly, well, then we got to jump on it.
It could be a compatibility issue too sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is hard to test on PCs. I mean, because there are so many different types of designs, so many different things. So sometimes a certain segment or a certain group or a region, they're not quite where they would like to be as far as their computer builds go and things like that, their video cards. So that causes some problems, in certain regions. So if you're getting tickets from a specific region, try to find out like where maybe and what their systems are that they're running, because it may be very.
You find out their average ping is 350. It's like, oh, maybe that's a problem.
Yeah. So I mean if
Oh, it's because you're in Russia.
Yeah, I mean that's part of basically as far as customer service and stuff, which actually we work with that sometimes, where you have to be able to ask the right questions and be able to get to the center of it if it seems like it's happening in one area or one region, besides just the people that are trolls.
So managing the scope of it in your head, I guess, really helps. All right, thank you.
Just get used to it.
Okay, cool. So I'll come around here. Here you go.
So specifically my question is about, I know speedrunning is a very big thing, and
Did you
that's
say speed writing?
speed running,
Got it.
like speedrunning in game. Well, I know that's where you find a
They
lot
just
of
knocked
bugs.
3 frames off the Mario run.
Because speedrunners, they'll find and exploit bugs to get better game time. And I know specifically there's the Evil Within 2, there was one where if you walked up with an axe to a bunch of rocks, you could launch yourself across the map and skip huge parts of the game. Have you encountered any like footage or something about a game that you've worked on from a speedrunner or from a perspective of a casual player where they showed a bug that then got fixed because that was brought to your attention or anything like that?
I can think of one time that happened where we saw a video of someone demonstrating a feature, and I saw it and thought, hey, that shouldn't happen. Then I went to QA to confirm it, and then they wrote up a bug and we fixed it. So I can think of that happening once, but it's not common.
Yeah, I might be able to actually chime in on that because, like recently, a lot of times we look at YouTube videos of people who put up exploits. So that's the fun part about the internet is that when you find an exploit that makes the game a lot easier, people post it and love talking about it. So we do occasionally look up, like we'll see a YouTube video of someone who's like, this sick exploit that makes you attack 50 billion times faster with a melee weapon, and then it gets fixed. And then, their documentation, like they wrote out this whole exploit list of like how to do it, and then we fixed it. So it kind of nulled it out. Um, and sometimes it's a hard decision because a lot of those exploits, like you don't want them to be in your game if they make the game phenomenally easier, but some of them aren't harmful. They make an aspect fun, and it takes us to evaluate it as designers with QA to kind of consider what the ripple effects are. So thankfully, a lot of times we might find an issue that someone is exploiting, but isn't like a major problem, or they find an issue where it's like, hey, I'm able to get $5 billion that just makes the game basically pointless, and that's something we fix, as we know that's huge and that's game changing. Mm. Anyone else?
So I had a question about practicing or getting some experience for QA, if or possibly like doing something that could be put into the portfolio. Do you have any ideas on that?
In my personal experience, I just made games myself in college. I practiced with Unity. I tried to make a small game, and then because I wanted to get in QA as well when I was younger, I would just start playing the game myself. If I saw a problem with the collider, I'd try to figure out what I did wrong there and try to fix it. If I found a problem with I walk into a wall and I get launched to the other side of my level, I try to fix it myself just to give myself an understanding of what's going on here. And though in my professional experience, I didn't have to do any of the debugging myself, but it at least gave me an understanding what the programmers might actually go through, and it definitely looked a lot better for me than, like I mentioned before, just being somebody that's like, oh, I love to play games. It's great.
So does everybody.
Let you know what to look for.
Right.
Let you know how to exploit, like especially different kinds of systems or different.
And how to communicate that to someone else who has to fix it.
Right.
So just building your own systems of whatever kind, and then
yeah,
documenting the process.
I would say also if you have any even local chapter of a group, a meetup group or anything where you live of game designers, people that are just coding or trying to do anything or doing coding classes at colleges or anything, volunteer to QA it. And that would be a good way you actually could get some hands-on experience on a lot of bugs, probably more than likely.
Yeah. There are a lot of games too. Sorry, real quick. There are a lot of games too that have early access, and they'll have Discord groups where the developers will actually ask for feedback. They'll be like, hey, if you find anything, let us know. And that's a good way to practice as well, because then you're also directly talking to the developer, and then you can mention that in your resume or something like that. And that's something that we look for, and we actually put higher than most people.
Yeah,
that
you
are
say
just
a bug I submitted got acted upon.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big deal.
Yes.
Try to be active about it in different games that you play.
Early access is good.
Definitely. So currently there's about 5 or 6 minutes, so we might be able to cover maybe 1 or 2 more questions. But definitely after the panel, feel free to come to any of us if you have any other questions. We'll be able to stick around and answer any of them. So I could probably get 1 or 2 more questions in.
This gentleman's been waiting for a good while.
No,
right there. We're at second row. There.
Thanks. What about, can you talk a little bit about creating the testing document, what you need to do it from, and what a good testing document looks like when you're starting the big
You don't
QA
want to hear
process?
what I think about testing documents.
Tell me what you don't think about testing documents.
What I don't think about them is testing documents sound like a good idea, and they are. I've never really seen it work super well. The best testing documents I've seen have been very generic. They've been, here's a list of features, and here's what they're supposed to do, confirm that it works. Trying to come, and I've been at a company that tried to do that. Here's the features we want, here's how to test them, and it never ends, it just never meets it never survives meeting the enemy. It always changes, and it's like, well, why did we bother writing that up when we ended up doing something completely different anyway? That's my view of it. It's probably wrong, so I'm going to defer to the people who actually manage this stuff.
In my experience, I don't know anybody here. Has anybody played an Adult Swim game like over time? Okay, wow, a lot of you guys. So I was in charge of Battle Chef Brigade most recently. That came out last year. I'm still in charge of that game. But that was a game where I wrote a really extensive test plan on. So for that, I played that game many times. I've probably beaten that game well over 500 times at this point. But I played that for a good solid like 3 weeks and learned every single part of that game. And my extensive, I guess, test plan for me was probably about 30 pages. For some games that might be short. We had a game where we had a test plan that was closer to like 70. But to put as much detail into those and note things that you think should be looked at and things that the average player would definitely see, and also put things that the average player would not do. Like you mentioned walking into a corner trying to kill Dora the Explorer like 5 times. Like those, you need to be as detailed as possible. And they, at least in our group, they worked for a good chunk of time, and then after a while, most people kind of know the game, and they just kind of do their own thing.
And as the game develops, they become out of date really fast.
Right, yeah, you have to constantly update those.
That's what I really don't like.
My test plan for Battle Chef Brigade started at like 22 pages, and over time with DLC, we just launched some DLC last month, or 2 months ago, it's gone up to like 45 pages. Like it keeps growing as you're doing more, and you have to stay consistent with it.
Awesome. So it looks like I think the panel wraps up at 8 o'clock. So I don't think
Well,
we can take any more.
2 minutes.
2
We got
minutes.
one more.
Oh, we have 2 minutes. Okay, so we got time for one more question. Anyone? Up here real quick, and then again after the panel, we can still answer questions.
Wish we had like an awesomeness filter to pick the best question.
A little bit earlier, you touched on game tracking software.
Game tracking?
Or bug tracking software, I'm sorry.
Got it.
Do you have a list of software that can be used? Because I mean I do QA for one of the companies over here, and I've just been doing it the old-fashioned way.
Jira, Bugsplat, and Bugzilla, and Mantis are the 4 that just jump. And I prefer Jira.
Yeah, we use Jira exclusively at our place too.
Jira, Jira, just the way it sounds.
Yeah, Jira and Bug Tracker were like,
Yeah.
those are the 2 that most people use. Mantis, a lot of Asian.
Yeah, Mantis is something you can deploy yourself. I think it's actually a freeware or a shareware. Jira, what's nice about bug tracking software is, especially the good ones, and they all do this now, all the good ones, they integrate directly to your email. So when you file a bug, it automatically emails the people who it needs to. And when they do stuff, it keeps people connected directly.
You can have a real conversation back and forth.
Yeah. You're actually talking through Jira, but you don't realize it. And that's nice for history and triage. Someone comments on a bug, instantly everyone gets that comment. Particularly the comment is, it's not my fault. Just Google Jira.
Yeah, I'm sure there are tutorials all over the place.
Yeah, definitely on YouTube. That's what I would advise. There's a lot of videos that show just how it works.
Yeah, one thing I want to add real quick as far as the overall QA thing, as far as getting involved in everything, there's a lot of different aspects to QA right now. It's not just basically sitting down at the computer and playing. There's also a lot of VR QA where actually you have to be fairly active and very athletic actually to be able to keep playing through and through the game again. Like we worked on raw data when it came out. That was actually pretty intensive.
Yeah, we shipped Killing Floor Incursion. I was one of the programmers on that, and we had 2 QAs working pretty much continuously, and they were just in the room, and they had to be physically fit. It's just they had to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's all different kinds of games, different platforms. You may be QA on something that's just does apps and stuff like that. I mean, it's all there's more to do it than just games. There's a lot of aspects to it. You're gonna run into all different kinds of cool things.
Yeah, accessibility QA is a big thing that is super important now and should have been important all the time. But you may be able to play a VR game, no problem, but I can't. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well when you're doing QA.
And sometimes that's hard to test. This game works great unless you're colorblind. We have anyone who's colorblind? Nope. Well, we're going to have to fake it. So that's on the one side. On the other side, that's not a huge part of most gaming communities, but they can be very vocal. I can think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, and then outside that, there's also QA also extends into also compliance testing as well for the different platforms for
Yes,
the first
compliance
parties,
testing, big deal.
and as well as for linguistic testing as well.
If you're going to submit a game on a console, QA is your friend. I mean, you need them because you're going to you send it off to Microsoft for Xbox or PS4 or Sony or something. They're not going to tell you that afternoon the first few things they found. No, they're going to send you a report in 2 weeks with a huge laundry list of everything they found.
Well, hopefully, until they find the three things and they stop.
Yeah, sometimes if it's major enough. But the point is that you don't have the feedback that you need, and that's why you need the QA department constantly hammering on all the things that might be wrong because you do have the feedback right there.
Well, thank you guys very much, and thank you all very much for attending this panel. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure we'll stick around so we'll be able to answer anything. So thank you all very much for attending the panel.